Let's go back to 1995, a time of change. Big, sometimes terrifying, changes. The country we'd grown accustomed to living in had disappeared. Something new, something incomprehensible, had taken its place. And every person, every adult, like our hero Robert, was trying to figure out what would happen now. How would we live on? That year, stability disappeared. The certainty that tomorrow would be like yesterday vanished. People who had lived by strict rules their entire lives suddenly found themselves in a world where, it seemed, there were no rules anymore. And that was the most frightening thing. Robert Sergevich. He's 45 years old. He's been an engineer his entire life. A highly skilled specialist at the avant-garde plant, which once built important things for the entire country. In Soviet times, being an engineer was an honor. It meant you were smart, in demand, and your work was valued. Robert Sergevich. He's 45 years old. He's been an engineer his entire life. A highly skilled specialist at the avant-garde plant, which once built important things for the entire country. In Soviet times, being an engineer was an honor. It meant you were smart, in demand, and your work was valued. Robert sincerely believed that his knowledge and experience were his greatest assets, that they were needed, that his ability to design and innovate guaranteed his future. But 1995 taught him a harsh lesson. The avant-garde plant was at a standstill. There were no orders. If money came in, it was in meager amounts. Robert, like his colleagues, showed up for work. He was on the payroll. But what was he doing? He was waiting for a miracle, waiting for someone to say, "Robert Sergevich, we have a new project. The country needs your ideas." But the phone was silent. The plans didn't appear. And this was worse than being fired. You were at work, but you were useless. It was called hidden unemployment. You weren't exactly unemployed, but you weren't working either. You simply existed. And this uncertainty ate away at you from the inside. Last October's salary. They're promising to pay 20%. When? Next month? And what are we supposed to live on now? And what's this piece of paper with the speakers on it? The accountant said, "Here, Robert Sergevich, is your salary. Sell it, and you'll have money." I'll sell it. But who needs speakers? I'm an engineer, not a salesman. Money in 1995 was a different story. One day you'd be a millionaire. The next, your millions wouldn't be worth a pack of cigarettes. Prices were rising every day. It was called hyperinflation. And people lost faith in the ruble. Dollars became the currency of choice. But where could you get dollars if you weren't even paid in rubles? Robert, who had earned an honest salary his entire life, suddenly found that his labor wasn't converting into anything tangible. His savings, if he had any, had long since vanished. He felt the ground slipping from under his feet. The hardest part awaited Robert at home, where he was supposed to be a support system, a protector. His wife, Elena, a music teacher, hadn't received her salary for months either. Sometimes she received it in goods, sometimes a pack of sugar, sometimes an entire set of crystal glasses. The family tried to hold on. But the children don't understand why they can't buy a new toy, why they have to wear out old shoes, why there's no cream cake for birthdays. How can I look them in the eye? I promised them a future, stability. I promised them that if they studied hard and worked hard, everything would come. And what did I give them? An empty fridge and promises. My son wants to take karate lessons, but I can't afford it. My daughter dreams of a Barbie doll, but I can't buy her one. My profession, my pride, my knowledge, none of it is worth a penny in this new world. I feel like an old machine that has suddenly become unnecessary. But I can't break down. I have to come up with something. For them. For my family. That night, Robert understood. He couldn't wait any longer. He couldn't sit idly by. The old world was dead, and with it, his old profession. To save his family, he would have to change himself. He would have to forget his diploma, his status, his former ideals. 1995 demanded something different. It demanded desperate courage. It demanded ingenuity. And it demanded becoming a different person. a person who would fight for every piece of bread for his children. In 1995, the industrial heart of this vast country wasn't just beating intermittently, it was stopped. The Soviet economy, built on giants, now lay in ruins. Factory cities, factory states. When they began to die, their rubble buried not only their machines and technologies, but also the lives of millions of people who had dedicated their minds and labor to them for decades. For engineer Robert Sergevich and his colleagues, the plant had always been something immutable, something eternal. It seemed you could destroy the ideology, you could change the flag over the Kremlin, but the steel would still need to be smelted, and the most complex instruments would still need to be assembled. But the reality of 1995 turned out to be more cynical than any prediction. It turned out that in the new coordinate system, creation is worth pennies, and survival is everything. It was called administrative leave, a beautiful phrase that hid an abyss. You weren't fired, no. You were simply told, there's no work, no money, go home. Maybe we'll call you back in a month, or maybe in a year. Robert stood at the gate, clutching his battered briefcase. It contained the remnants of his professional life, a slide rule, a couple of blueprints, and a half-eaten margarine sandwich. He felt as if the ground had been ripped from under his feet. The factory was his identity. Without a pass in his pocket, he ceased to be a leading designer. He became just a middle-aged man in a cheap coat, unsure what to feed his children this evening. And then the ugliest brainchild of 1995 entered Robert's life. Barter, an economy without money. When the state and enterprises finally went bankrupt, the country returned to primitive barter. Robert was given a salary. In 3 months. It wasn't an envelope full of rubles. It was 2 boxes of rubber seals for plumbing fixtures and 5 sets of subwoofers. How ironic. The man who created complex communication systems now had to sell toilet parts. This is the price of my higher education. My sleepless nights over projects. My rationalization proposals. 2 boxes of rubber. The accountant said, sell this at the market and you'll have money for bread. She looked at me as if I should thank her. How am I supposed to sell this? I'm an engineer. I can calculate tolerances and fits. I know field theory. I don't know how to stand at the metro and shout, buy gaskets. I can't bring myself to do it. It seems to me that all my ancestors are looking at me. My father, a frontline soldier, my mother, a teacher. What would they say if they saw me now? In 1995, the city had become one continuous, ice-free market. Professors stood next to criminals, ballerinas next to alcoholics. It was the great leveling of poverty. Humiliation had become the norm. Robert looked at his colleagues in misfortune. To his right stood a woman in a sophisticated hat, selling family silver piece by piece. On the left is a guy in camouflage selling cigarettes. The poverty of 95 smelled of exhaust fumes from old Icarus buses, cheap cigarettes, and dampness. This was poverty that couldn't be hidden. It spilled out of the apartments and onto the avenues.
Hey man, what's the price? I'll take it all wholesale for half price. Or trade it for vodka. Royal vodka, pure alcohol. Mix it up and you'll be a king.
I don't need vodka. I'd like some milk. For the kids.
He wanted milk. Well, good luck, engineer. Alcohol is currency, and your rubber bands will be in the trash in a week.
It was the moment of truth. In 1995, you either accepted the rules of the game or slowly faded away. Royale spirits in liter-sized bottles with bright labels became the lifeblood of this ailing economy. People drank it to forget, paid for services, and used it as money. Robert refused. He didn't sell a single pad that day. He returned home with a heavy box and an even heavier heart. The 1995 crisis hit where it hurt most, male dignity. For centuries, men were protectors and providers. The system Robert grew up in guaranteed him this role as long as he worked honestly. But now the rules had changed. Honest work had become the shortest path to starvation. Unemployment in the 1990s wasn't just a lack of a full-time position. schedule. It was a feeling of total uselessness. The country that yesterday was proud of its missiles today needed only dealers and security guards. Forgive me, friends. Forgive me. But books can't cry from hunger. But my daughter can. Today I will carry you to the market. Tomorrow, the crystal from the sideboard. And the day after tomorrow? What will remain of me the day after tomorrow, when I take everything out of the house except the walls? In 1995, the gap between those who had fit into the market and those left behind became bottomless. While Robert was deciding which book to sell to buy a pack of pasta, the first boutiques were opening in the city center. Glittering, inaccessible. This inequality bred more than just anger, it bred apathy. A huge swathe of the population, engineers, doctors, teachers, felt like strangers in their own country. It was a year of great betrayal. The state betrayed its most loyal and educated citizens, abandoning them to the jungles of wild capitalism, unarmed and without maps.